Hello friends, let me show you what I've come up with for the next tutorial. Today we are doing some farming stuff. This system is quite complicated to achieve with Adventure Creator. It is highly unorthodox to try to create a farming game with Adventure Creator, but I've just went ahead and created this system and going to try to show you how this thing works. So basically we are just skipping days here, and as we can see, plants are growing and now they're done, and we can harvest them, and we have stuff, and we can do that as many times as we want here. Currently this is very simple. You always get seeds from the plants, and yeah, you can basically do plants forever. It would be probably better to have some sort of store, like in Stardew Valley, where you get the seeds. Yes, but let's start going through everything. First off, the sprites I'm using currently are all open source on OpenGameArt. I can link them down below. These are very simple sprites, but they will do for our tutorial here. We have some tile sets that we are using here. Very simple, that's besides the point. And we have individual parts of the sprites that I showed you, and then we have this player character. Okay, so what I would do first, start with the simplest thing. What I have is only one global variable at the moment, and it is the date. You just basically always add 1 when you click the next day. That is basically a cheat for me to advance the days, but normally you would have to make a like where you go to your home and sleep and then you progress to the next day. But here I'm just skipping the days because I want to show the basic farming system. So yeah, have that. Then your inventory needs to have all the different seeds and produce that you get from growing those seeds. What we have currently are tomato seeds, a tomato, potato seeds and potato. And all of them should have can carry multiple with them. I just added a carry on start here, so we have some seeds to begin with. So we can showcase this system. Then I created a hotspot. I've done it in a way that the farm plot is basically a prefab asset, and all the different plants needs to be prefabs also. The settings of the farm plot are as follows. There's the basic things that you get when you create your hotspot. It has a box collider and a hotspot. What we need to do here is add the inventory interactions for all the different seeds. Yeah, when you make more, there needs to be more of these, and it's going to be quite a list. But you only have to do this once, because you can then just duplicate the same hotspot everywhere where you can plant seeds. Don't worry about the parameter stuff here that are showing for me. Just make sure that your interaction source for the hotspot is asset file. You need to create an action list asset, but here the parameters are going to help because we only need to create one action list asset. And for us it's going to be this plant crop action list. I have added this sound effect. You need to find your own sound effects because I cannot provide you those. But then we have different parameters that we have to make sure we have. You need to check the use parameter checkbox and then create 3 different parameters. There will be a parameter of the type GameObject, which is named hotspot to effect. The naming conventions are not that important, just something that you will recognize yourself. But we will need a GameObject, another type GameObject for the crop to spawn, then a parameter of inventory type, inventory item for the seeds to remove. Then we need to have an action of inventory add or remove, and we will remove the seeds which we are planting. And here you will see this P sign, and you will have to override this field with the parameter. So click there and it will automatically select the only one that is fitting for this item to remove spot. We are always removing just one, so we don't need to create a different parameter for this. Then we have object add or remove, and we will add the crop to spawn. So we will have to override this field also. And the position relative to will be relative to the hotspot to effect. So that will also be overridden with the parameter. Send to parameter, this is not needed. And after that we will have an action type of object add or remove, and then we will remove the hotspot to effect. Also override it with parameter. Parameters help you deal with stuff, so you don't have to have different action lists for each and every different crop that you're planting, and you just can do this. We are overriding with parameter, and we are setting those parameters from the different farm plots that we have. And then the last thing is a custom script that I created. We are detecting and attaching children. This is just a method name that I created, and it is under the crops game object that is in the scene. Because I want all of the crops that we are spawning be children of this game object here. So this script is basically just checking for that crop tag and attaching all of those objects as its children, because we are sending messages to this crops game object and to its children. That way we don't have to individually send these messages to each and every game object, each and every instance of a different crop. So just here. We will go through this script in a bit. So that is our plant crop action list. Then back in the hotspot that you've created, this will be a lot to do, obviously, but for each and every different crop that you want to be able to plant, you will have to have this set interaction parameters script attached. So we are setting the interactions parameters, the interaction which is the plant crop action list we just created. We have to set the interaction type to inventory and interaction to the seeds that you have. Then affect the farm plot, which will be our prefab here. And for the tomato seeds, we will need to spawn the tomato planted crop. And always when it's asking whether we want to reference prefab or scene instance, we always want to do reference scene instance. Otherwise there will be some error messages that it's not finding the object. And then just seeds to remove tomato seeds. And then duplicate that and just change the different settings for the potato. So basically here just change potato seeds here, potato seeds here, and then the different crop. This prefab will also need to have remember transform with save scene presence checked. This will allow its presence to be recorded in the scene. And this linked prefab constant ID number will by default be 0, but you want to change it to whatever the constant ID of the object is. I'm not entirely sure if it needs to be just that, but I have set it to be that and it works for me. Whatever it is, it needs to be non-zero. And when you create a prefab for your hotspot, it needs to be placed in the resources asset folder. So Adventure Creator will correctly find it and can refer to it when creating instances from this. Then you basically could just duplicate the hotspot like we have here for each. These are our plots that can be planted on, and because we are working with a grid, this is easier to handle. So we have currently these 18 spots here that we can put our plants in. Since you haven't created these crops to spawn yet, we'll need to create those. This is our tomato prefab. It is also just a basic hotspot, but with a sprite renderer for your sprite. Add your seed sprite here. It will be the default sprite for it. And then it will need to have the same box collider. And it will have this crop growth script that we are adding to all of our different crops. We will go through that shortly. The tomato prefab also needs to have variables component with grow time set to it. This script will refer to this grow time variable, so that's why we need it. And then we have our hotspot. And it will have an harvest interaction, which is also, this also needs to be asset file for the interaction source. Here I have actually set this hotspot parameter to be crop to delete, but I don't actually know if it's required. I will need to try probably with no parameter set here. Let's try. I'm just going to go into our scene and see what happens. Everything seems to be working correctly. I don't see any errors or anything. So yeah, it seems like you don't have to set the parameter here because we are setting it in the set interaction parameters. And then this also will have to have the remember transform with the same idea as the farm plot. So let's go through the harvest action list next, because it will need to have a bit more parameters. This will have 8 parameters total. And as you can see here, quickly looking, everything is overwritten with these parameters. So first we have crop growth time parameter, and this is to check the component variable, which will be the same as we have here. This is the grow time. Then we will need to have parameter of the type GameObject for crop to delete. We don't need to set any of the default values here because we are doing that with the set interaction parameters component. Then we will have a crop fully grown. It is of the type integer. Then we will have an item to add for inventory item. Then we will have an integer type for item quantity to add. How many tomatoes you are getting from this, for example. Then we also have item 2 to add, which for us is the seeds. But if you don't want to always have seeds from your plant when you are harvesting them, you can skip these two. Item 2 quantity to add. This is for the quantity of the second item. And then the last is of type GameObject for hotspot to affect. Okay, we are doing first variable check. We will check the component variable overridden with the parameter for crop growth time. And we will see if it is equal to crop fully grown. And only then we can harvest this crop. Then we will add an inventory item. Item to add is overridden with the parameter. And we will increase the count by the item quantity to add parameter. And here we are adding the seeds. So if you don't want to have seeds, you can skip this. But here we are adding just the different parameter. Then we have an object add. We are instantiating hotspot to affect. So when we remove our crop, we will bring back the farm plot, because every time you plant a crop, the farm plot hotspot is destroyed. And here we are creating a new one. And it will be relative to game object crop to delete. So we will see the position of the crop, and we are setting this to be on its place. And then after that we delete the crop. We have to do this like this instead of replace, because it threw some errors at me. It probably threw errors because we were trying to check the position of the crop even if it was already deleted. And this, yeah, then we just played the sound effect for harvesting. So here a lot of parameters and overriding everything, so we only need to have a single action list for harvesting your plants. So back to our tomato. Here we will only need one of the set interaction parameter, and I have set it here to be the interaction type of examine. As we have it here, it is the right click instead of left click, just like it is in Stardew Valley, I think. And we here set, make sure that the crop growth time is for its own component variable. Crop growth time is set to grow time. Crop to delete is itself referencing the scene instance. Here we check if it's fully grown, and for this crop the growth time total is 10 days. So it will be the same as the final amount here for the script, which we will go through momentarily. And then how many of the tomatoes do we want to add is added here. And then here we are adding the seeds and how many of those we want. I think 2 is more reasonable than 3 probably. I don't know. It's probably more reasonable to not have any seeds from the plants. So it's more gamified like. So, and you can just duplicate your items basically. This is just for me to show how it's done. And then for the hotspot effect, we will want to add a new farm plot, and it is also referencing a scene instance. And yeah, we had the remember transform here with the same ID number of as its constant ID number. Still not sure if it needs to be that, but it needs to be non-zero, so that needs to be set. And these prefabs also need to be placed in a resources asset folder. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's something to do with how Adventure Creator reads the data and finds these items more easily. So you probably should also make a new folder here for your prefabs and just move all of them here. So then comes the tricky part, the script, because we have created 2 custom scripts here. Now, before we go through this, I want to note that I am not an expert in coding, but for me, for this situation here, it seems to work just fine. And yes, we will need to be using AC because we will need to get the variables component of the object that we have attached the script to. You can pause this to copy, but I will also provide a link to the script, so you don't have to write it yourself, just to make your life a bit easier. We are not here to learn coding after all. But yeah, we have a private enum. This also probably could be done with AC, because if we go to our variables, to my knowledge the pop-up variable is of similar type to enums. So we technically probably could do this with just Adventure Creator, but this is easier to manage. We will have a growth state. The growth states are set here. Seedling, sapling, mature, flowering, or flower. And we set the default growth state to be seedling, so when it's a seed. So then we created public integer values for all of the different growth times. These are just the default values. You can modify them however you want. And then we will also have sprites for sapling, mature, flower, and harvest sprites. We need to find the sprite renderer of this object, and we will also need to have a gvar of the grow time, so we can find the component variable of this object. In the start, we need to get component sprite renderer. We need to run this setup function just to make sure that everything is correctly when we are launching the game or loading the game. And we are getting the grow time component variable. Everything basically happens here in this public void grow. We are seeing if our grow time is not the same as flower growth time. So basically, flower growth time is when it reaches the maximum, it won't grow anymore. So if it's not in its maximum growth time, it will add 1 to the growth time integer value. This is how it's done with Adventure Creator. You need to write this kind of thing. Then we have a switch for the growth state and cases for each of the different growth states. So seedling, we are checking if the growth time for this is equals to the seedling growth time. Then we will send our state to the next state and also change the sprite for the next state. Then we are at sapling. Again, same thing. When the time reaches this sapling growth time, we will go to the next state with a new sprite. And again, the same thing here for the mature growth state. And then we are going to flower, and when the flower growth time is done, we will just change the sprite, and we are not changing the state anymore. Here we just have this default thing for login and error if we are not finding the state for this. And at that, it shouldn't happen, but at that point something is broken. And here is the setup function that we run here earlier. It is just to see where we are at that moment, because when you save and load and you don't have this, the sprites for all your crops will default to the seedling state. I'm not sure if probably the growth states will also default back to their original state. But here we are, because we are using the component variable growth time of the object, it will be saved. We can check here where the time is basically. Is it over equal or greater than this? Then we are setting the sprites and the states to its corresponding values. And this is again set for each of the different states. So this basically ensures that our plants are saved in their correct state. It is quite complicated, and again we are not going through everything, like we are not writing this video, but you can either stop and copy all of this for your own, or you can just grab the script from the link I have provided. Then in our tomato prefab, if we look at the crop growth, these are public values, so you can just set them to anything here, and then here we will have to place corresponding sprites for everything. So here, for example, we have set the tomato sprites. From the different crops that we have here, we just selected these sprites basically. And whatever you want to grow, you would select those sprites. This is quite handy to have this kind of sprites here for that. And that's about it for the crop prefab. When you want to make new prefabs, just duplicate this prefab and change the values to your new crop. And if the constant ID number is not changing, you might have to delete all of the components that set this ID and then add them again. So just to ensure that the constant ID is not the same as in any of the different prefabs, because that will cause some issues. So now we have a farm plot, we have crops, we have created 2 different crops for me here for different grow times. And we are always, when we create them, we are always deleting the farm plot and adding a new crop here under the crops game object. And then we just pass on the days. and this happens. And we get stuff. And here always when we create new crops, the console will show that they have given new IDs for everything that we spawn into the scene. So let's go through the little script that detects and attaches the children. So it's basically just copy this value here, this text only. It will need to have a public string, and we want to find any game object with this tag, and then for each game object with this tag, this says object with script because I tried to detect if they had this specific script, but it's object with a tag. We should probably change this. Object with this tag, we will place them as a child of this object, and if it's, we are ensuring also if it's not already a child, so we don't have to place them again as their child. Then just add the tag to detect as crop or whatever you want it to have, and all of your different crops should have the crop tag. That way they are detected. I also had the next day action list here, which is just a button in my in-game menu. When we click this action list runs. It just adds one to the global day, and then it runs the grow method from this crops object, and it is sending it to the children too, so it will be sent to all of your children, which are the crops. And every time we start or load the scene where you have your crops, you will need to run these. For the crops, detect and attach children, because they are not saved for some reason. So this will reattach them as children, and this will set up the crops to their state that they were when we had saved the game. So everything should be working correctly. I added, I think, this wait time here because we want to make sure that the children are attached before we are trying to send this setup for them, so they will be detected correctly. At this point everything should work just fine. We currently have this area for our crops, and we are here just planting our seeds. We could go next day, plant a crop, next day, they are growing, next day. I didn't click the correct point there. There we go. If we go save and load, everything is the same. And then we just go a few days ahead. And here we can collect them. Go a few days more, and then we have more stuff to collect. So basically, any area that you want to have your farm plot, you should have this hotspot. When you duplicate it, luckily, it will automatically detect these changes here. So it changes automatically the farm plot here to itself, basically. So I think we have gone through everything here. It is quite complicated. If I have missed something, I'm sorry, because it's quite late at the moment, which is also why I'm speaking like this. But this should basically be everything. Just place your prefabs in the resources folder and you should be good to go. 2 custom scripts, a lot of different sprites for different crops, and you're set. If you're interested in learning more, let me know, because currently the crops or the farm plots, they are just there. You can straight put them there. If you'd want to have a system where you have to use a tool to ready them for the plants, that could be done, but that's a bit different topic, and it's going to take a bit of more fiddling around to see how that would work. I think that is the very basics of how to do little bit of a farming system in an adventure creator game. It's very unorthodox. It's probably not perfect and stuff might not work as you want. If you want to have, like, for example, timers for your plants, so they're basically growing in real time, that would be a whole different thing to do. For this tutorial, I just wanted to create something in the lines of Stardew Valley, because I love that game, who doesn't? But yeah, it's quite interesting. The parameters are essential. You need them for this to work. They are quite handy because we can manage this with just a few prefabs and a few action lists. So if you want to create more crops, even more, you just need to duplicate this for as many times as you want and create the different sprites. And you just need to attach the correct sprites and different crops and seeds and plants that you get from them. And then you only just need to create all the different inventory interactions for the farm plot hotspot prefab we have here, and also need to have all the set interaction parameters for each of the different interaction. It's quite a lot of work, I'm sure. If you want to have, let's say, 20 different crops, you would need to have this 20 times here. And I'm not entirely sure how efficient this system is for the script and the different things, and how saving goes, for example, if we are changing scenes and stuff like that. I haven't tested that enough, but for our purposes right here, it seems to work just fine. If you encounter any issues, let me know and we will try to figure it out. So yeah, that's the first little tutorial for something of a 2D farming game with Adventure Creator. Thank you for watching.